Hey everybody, this is Dimmick with CustomInsured, and this is part 4 in our podcast series overviewing all your health insurance options, exploring all of your health insurance options. This podcast, I'm going to dig in a little bit into private coverage. This is something we introduced on the last one, podcast 3, and most people are pretty unfamiliar of private coverage, so I wanted to take a minute to kind of dig into a little bit and discuss, whether or not it's too good to be true, so to speak. So with private coverage, this is comparison to ACA or Obamacare policies. They're typically going to run about 30% less than the exchange policies or the Obamacare policies. And the reason for that is it's pretty simple. Private coverage has been around 60 plus years, the company we work with. And really about 10 years ago, the pricing was on par with, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, these traditional HMOs and PPOs. But once Obamacare hit, these traditional policies, they've had to increase their premiums every year. Some of the topics we've discussed on previous podcasts, but they've had to increase those every year to make up for the losses because they cannot underwrite on those policies anymore. Now, on the private side, they do underwrite, so they haven't been hit with these big losses year in and year out. So they've been able to keep their premiums stable. So in terms of why there's so much lower in cost on the private side, it's really as simple as that. The introduction of Obamacare has caused premiums on traditional HMOs and PPOs to skyrocket, and the private coverage hasn't gone that same route. Now, another big kind of question that people have about private is, the fact that it does offer nationwide PPO coverage. A lot of people ask how that's really possible. If you go on the exchange, there's no PPO policies on there. They're HMO only. And really the reason the private coverage offers the PPO coverage is, they kind of started in the smaller, more rural areas. They were servicing those communities that didn't really have many coverage options. And, as an insurance company, if you're dealing with people in rural areas, they're outside of quick convenience to hospitals and things like that. They're always going to have to drive. So when they set these networks up, they had to give people access to be able to go anywhere just because, Take Central Texas as an example. You could drive to Austin, you could drive to San Antonio, you could drive to Houston, if you live in one of those little towns right in between. So when the private packages were set up, they had to give coverage everywhere simply because they were covering people in more rural areas. So they built out a nationwide coast-to-coast network to give people all that coverage. And the third option is, the third thing about private coverage, a lot of people ask, why haven't I never heard of this before? It just, something doesn't seem right. Why haven't I heard of this? And really the simple answer with that is there hasn't been a need. We work a lot in the cities. We're in Central Texas. And again, before Obamacare came, the options were plentiful. People in the cities, they didn't really need other options because, there were so many as it was. But now that all the changes have been introduced with Obamacare, premiums are going up, deductibles are going up, networks are shrinking. There's suddenly a need in the cities for the private coverage because it actually addresses all these new issues that are being introduced with the Obamacare policy. So that's just kind of a real brief overview as far as the private coverage, because this is a new concept for people, just kind of addressing the main concerns that people may have when they're initially introduced. That's all for now. Take care, and we'll have another podcast shortly. Thank you.